Hi, everybody. How you doing? This is student participation, how to get all students to participate in class discussions. So I'll get started in just a minute while we let everybody come in. But I also wanted to let you know that this is going to be participatory. So I'm going to run you through one of the scenarios that I've done with my students, and you get to be the student. So I'm going to make you do breakout rooms and discuss a political issue and so forth. Okay, so we'll get to that in a minute or so. Okay, let me go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Doug Ficker. I'm a social studies teacher at Northwest High School. I'm starting my 25th year. As you all know, last year was an amazing challenge, to be positive about it. But what we did at the high school was we had remote learning Wednesdays. So we were required to connect with students via Zoom on Wednesdays. That was for the second half of the year. So I started thinking, okay, how am I going to do this? I want to make this in a way that everybody participates, because it's very easy to be in a Zoom meeting, because I've done this many, many times, and just, you hit mute on, stop the video and just kind of, soak it all up or do something else. I wanted all my students to participate in this activity. So what I decided to do, and I ripped this off of a website called the National Constitution Center. They're up in Philadelphia. I'll show you their website in just a minute, but I decided to have Constitutional Debate Wednesdays. So instead of going over material, rehashing stuff, what I decided to do was to have them actually participate in a civil debate. And that was the key word, civil debate. So that's what I'm going to have you guys do today. I'm going to walk you through that, show you how I did it, and then actually have you do it. So we'll get to the issue in just a second. But the way, just for the structure for this, what I decided to do was to poll them at the beginning to see how they felt about the issue. Then I presented them with both sides or all sides of the issue with a PowerPoint. Meanwhile, they have a Google Doc up that says, here's one side, here's the other, and here's what I think. So that's what I graded them on, how, whether or not they turned that in, if they had well-reasoned arguments. Then I put them in breakout rooms, and they were usually in a group of 4 or 5, and they discuss with each other, okay, how do you feel about this? Well, at the beginning of this, several students were like, I'm just, because I polled them and asked them, I did a Google survey and asked them, how are things going with this? I was more direct with my questions, but basically, how are things going? And a lot of the students said, I'm still uncomfortable expressing myself virtually. So what I put together was I started using Google Jamboard, and just had that up, and they could throw their thoughts on that as well. So that proved to be, I think I reached about 90, or allowed about 90% of the students to participate. Like I said, either on Zoom or on the Jamboard. Okay. Does anybody have any questions before we get started? If you do, you can put them in the chat room, and we'll go from there. So let me start off by showing you the National Constitution Center's website and where I got this idea. There we go. Okay, I'm pulling it up now. I'm going to go ahead and show you their website. There we go. Okay, so the National Constitution Center is a nonprofit organization started by Congress, and their job is to nonpartisanly show the principles of the Constitution. They do a fabulous job, because not only do they have a great museum that's on the other side of it's by the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia, and across the mall from from Independence Hall. But they also do things like community forums. They have classes that students can go to. But where I ripped off their idea was they have a podcast, and they have one called We the People. And they do this every week. And the CEO of the National Constitution Center shares a debate on what issue. And you can see the one they had last week was, are vaccine mandates constitutional? They have experts on both sides weigh in, and then they take questions from the audience. And they do it in a civil way. So this is where I thought, okay, now I want to do something like this, because it's kind of non-traditional. So I ripped them off. Then I chose some topics. I asked the students after we started doing this what kind of topics that they would be interested in, and I got 3 or 4 from them as well. So here's how I did this. So I would choose a topic, and actually that is our topic: mandatory COVID vaccines. So you're going to get to weigh in your opinions on that, either with each other or on our Jamboard. But we did this back in February when vaccines were first coming out. So let me start by putting the poll up, and let me share that with you real fast. Oops. Okay, I'm still a little rusty on Zoom. Yeah. Okay, so here's what you do. You go to the website here, menti.com. You put in this code. You can do it on your phone or do it on your computer. And then there's our debate question. Should the US government make the COVID vaccine mandatory? Okay. It doesn't matter to me. When I was going through this, to me, what wasn't important is, what my opinion is, or I wanted the students to become informed and be able to express their opinion. And like I said, it worked pretty well. I think I reached about 80 to 85% of the students. When I surveyed the students, I got good comments like, it's nice that we get to debate with one another. Thanks for showing both sides of the issue and letting us make up their minds. But I also got comments like, I don't understand what the point of this is. So I didn't reach everybody, but name me a lesson that reaches everybody. So, but I really felt like this was a way to try to reach as many students as possible. Okay, so if you can see the live results here on your screen, we got the no's outweighing the yeses. Still kind of even though. When I did this with the students, they were overwhelmingly yes. There was like 2 no's and about 20 yeses. So I was kind of surprised by that. So then after they this is kind of my formative assessment here. I'm not going to do this with you guys, but at the very end, if I had time, I usually ran out of time because I had the students debate with each other together as a class after we do our breakout rooms. But I always polled them at the end, put the same poll up there to see if they changed their minds. And honestly, most of them didn't. They pretty much stayed the same. So I'm going to leave that up. But I'm going to stop sharing the screen because I need to go over to my PowerPoint. Okay, pull this up. All right, so this is the point where I would give them information. Again, we're doing this during our COVID year last year. So I'm going to do this again this year. This is the first time I've done this with this kind of really structured type of debate like this with students. And I got to tell you, it was a lot of fun from my part, from my standpoint, to just kind of sit back and watch the kids debate with each other. What I would do differently, I'm going to use these again this year, this format, but I'm not going to come up with the information. I'm going to make them, because we were limited on our Zoom sessions. We only had, by the time you get around to it, you really only had like 30 to 35 minutes. So due to the time constraint, I found both sides of the issues for them. But when I do this again this year, they're gonna put stuff together and work on a class shared Google Slides presentation. So they're gonna be putting together the pros and the cons. So, but that's the one thing I would do differently this year. I gotta get my lights back on. There we go. Okay, so let me run through this with you. Okay, so the issue again is can the federal government or Ohio's government force citizens to get vaccinated? Okay, so we're just going to run through. I just focused on facts at first, kind of show them what is the current status of whatever issue we're taking a look at. So this is the reported cases from the beginning. This is from the Center for Disease Control. These are their statistics. So they keep track in the United States of how many daily reported COVID cases we have. And you can see the spike was just, that would be what, middle towards the end of January of 2021 is where we reached our apex there. But you can see as the vaccine became available and more widely available, number of cases went way down to the lowest they've been really since the beginning of the pandemic. And then recently in the last, this is through yesterday's statistics, cases have gone up recently, but they're still nowhere near where they were, almost 300,000 reported daily cases back in the winter of last year. Okay, now let's look at vaccinations. Again, these are statistics from the Center for Disease Control, and this is through yesterday. And I find these numbers to be amazing, that there have been 409 million vaccines delivered. I find that to be totally amazing. We always hear that, government's slow at operating and so forth, but this is the fastest I've ever seen the government do anything in my lifetime. And 353 million doses. So there's 167 million people vaccinated in the United States out of a population of about 325 million. So we're looking at just about half of the available population that can get the vaccine are vaccinated. And you can see as we go down, the numbers get higher as we go down the ages here, as we go up in age. Okay. Now, then we took a look at Ohio's vaccination law, because I thought, well, I think most of my students know enough at this point about government. So this would have been in February. So we had studied government, 7 months probably at this point. So they should know that there's nothing in the United States Constitution, the national Constitution, that says that the federal government can mandate a vaccine, but states can. States have always been allowed to legislate for the health and general welfare of their citizens. So I decided to look up Ohio's law, and this is what it is. Child attending school must be immunized against each of these diseases: chickenpox, diphtheria, so on and so on. I'm not going to read the list to you. Okay, so that is a child enrolled in a child care center, licensed family daycare home, or receiving care from an in-home aide. They must be fully immunized against these diseases. And there's a few other ones is there. To demonstrate immunity, the child must present written evidence of receiving vaccinations or of being in the process of receiving them, okay? Now, there are exceptions to Ohio's law, and Ohio has changed its laws over the years to put exceptions in, okay? If the child has already had the disease and acquired natural immunity, they don't need to have that vaccination. If the vaccination is not medically appropriate for the child's age, if the previous medical condition makes the vaccine dangerous to the child, okay? Those are certainly medical reasons. And then there is a conscientious reason as well. The child's parent declines vaccinations for reason of conscience, including religious convictions, okay? So that's kind of the one that's been, okay, what does that mean? And that's what I always like to point out to the students: reasons of conscience, okay? The other ones, like I said, the other three are medically kind of make sense, but this one is pretty vague, okay? Then we go through the yes arguments, okay? Vaccines, again, these, I always tell the students, these are not necessarily my opinions. These are the opinions of people who, or the experts that have, have the yes argument or the no argument. So people that are saying, yes, we should require this vaccination, they've proven to be safe for an overwhelming majority of Americans, okay? Polls show that 25% of Americans, again, this was back in February, don't want a vaccine. Okay, we need herd immunity. 60 to 70% need to be vaccinated to get that herd immunity. If we have herd immunity, then we will return to normal. Again, this was back in February, and a lot of students were like, this is in a time when we were wearing masks everywhere, and businesses were still closed, and there's certain things you couldn't do. So people that say yes, say if the more people get vaccinated, the more we return to quote unquote normal. More and more doses are available, and this is a national emergency, and the Constitution changes during emergencies. I always like to bring up, wartime. When we have wartime, people's civil liberties are curtailed during a war, and so forth. Okay, now the no arguments. This was known as Operation Warp Speed, started by the Trump administration and continued by the Biden administration. It was fast-tracked, extremely fast-tracked by the Food and Drug Administration. So there's a lot of folks that are saying, I don't know if this is safe. I don't know if this is safe. What are the long-term impacts for, we're talking about putting a foreign object into my body. So they're not quite sure if it's safe. Mistrust plus information. So people that are saying no tend to be maybe a little distrustful or question government policies more so than those who are saying yes. You throw people that are distrustful of the government and you throw a mandate in there, you have to get this vaccination. You're looking at a public relations disaster for the United States government. Masks and social distancing were made mandatory by the state government. And the question is, how did that go? We've all probably seen people not social distancing, not masking, or even getting into, physical conflicts over whether or not to wear masks. Medical ethics could be violated. Can we, our doctor tell us you have to have this and you're not leaving my office until you have this vaccination.
Nice organized room. Okay. When I came back from Vegas,
constitutional freedoms protect against this. Government can't force the citizens to put something into their bodies, and it's especially true at the federal level. And there's already consequences for non-vaxxers. You have to you're supposed to wear masks in public if you're not vaccinated. There are certain places that will not allow you to travel to unless you're vaccinated. Cruise ships. There's a fight in Florida right now between cruise ships and the government of Florida, whether or not they can require vaccinations for people to wear masks. New York City passed a resolution. If you're not vaccinated or you can't prove that you've been vaccinated, you can't go to an indoor public gathering in New York City. Okay. All right. So at this point, I would ask the students if there's any questions that I can answer there, and they usually say yes or no. I'm not going to take questions from you guys because there's too many of you. No offense, but there's too many of you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you in groups of about 5. We'll do a breakout room. We'll do that for just a few minutes, and you can discuss with each other whether or not these vaccines should be mandatory. Now, I'm going to tell you guys, if I'm violating your professionalism here, I apologize, but I tell the students, keep it civil, don't yell at each other, respect others' opinions, and it'll make for a much greater debate. And I do have to throw this in here that when I went into I checked on my students in these rooms, and then when we came back as a group and discussed this, there was no yelling. It was a very, very civil discussion. And I kept telling my students, boy, politicians and adults could learn a lot from you guys just by not, respecting others. So that was like rule number 1. We have to respect each other's opinion. So I'm going to go ahead and put you guys into breakout rooms. There's 63 of you. I cannot do the math. That would be, let's see, let me do 11 breakout rooms. 11, Sign automatically. Okay, you should be getting the message to go to your breakout rooms. And I'll send you a message when there's a minute left on when we're going to come back as a group.
Hey, can you resend that Jamboard link?
Yes, I'll resend that. And I will also, I'm going to send you guys a link to the Google Doc I created for the kids to use while they're in these breakout rooms that they should have been filling out. Mm-hmm.
Can you translate that into Spanish for me? Well, great.
I'll work on that. Might take me several years.
I want you to use Google Translate so I can laugh at what it'll come up with.
Okay, so at this point, what I would do with my students, and we don't necessarily have to do this, but we would have an open forum here where students could express their opinions and ask each other questions together as a group. And like I said, there were students that were very, very intimidated by this. So I set up a Google Jamboard. I started doing that maybe the 4th or 5th time that I did this, and it worked really well because the students who were introverted and really didn't want to express their opinions, amongst their peers would do it on the Jamboard. So I sent a link to that in the in the chat. So if you wanted to do that and see how that works, go right ahead. I just prefer students do it as a Post-it note on there. That's what I always told them. And then what I would do is if a student put a thought-provoking question on there on the Jamboard, I would go ahead and read it for the group, and that usually would spark some debate. We always got to this point, and we were maybe 20 minutes in, and the kids would start chatting with each other about the issue, and it would always take way more time than I thought it would. Okay, it says there's no link to the Jamboard in the chat. Okay, let me try that again.
I saw something in the breakout room.
Yeah, I'd sent a message. I didn't mean to do that. There's a link to the Jamboard because the message only appeared for about a half a second. So that doesn't give you enough time to click on it. So if you look in the chat room, it's the link I just put in. And I also put the Google Doc that I use that I graded students with. It's real simple. It's just 3 boxes, my opinion, or this side, the other side, and then my opinion. Okay. Did anybody have any questions concerning this or make any have any suggestions on how to do this or make some modifications to it? if you can put that on the Jamboard too, or you can just go ahead and ask your questions now.
Doug, do you much prefer this to a whole class discussion in terms of getting more people involved? Do you think it works that much better?
Well, in the times of COVID, when we had to do our remote Wednesdays, it certainly worked. But as far as using it this year, I think an in-person debate would go better. And in the past, those have always worked. But I was always worried that, you always have that kid that doesn't really participate in the debate. How do you kind of force them to do it? And I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna do this again this year. Have them come up with the pros and cons, or the yes or no, the two sides, whatever. And then still have that Jamboard up there, so the kids who really are intimidated about bringing their ideas to their classmates still have a voice. So, does that answer your question, John?
Yeah, I mean, when you get in with 4 or 5 people, it's a different atmosphere, and I guess I could see why people would be more willing to say something than versus 20 to 30 kids in a class, and the Jamboard is an alternative. I do understand it. I'm just wondering if you were going to stay with it in the current year, or are you going to go more traditional and have full class plus the Jamboard as the sort of backup to get credit?
Yeah, I'm going to do both. But it was, like I said, it was a lot of fun from my standpoint. It was a lot of setup time, but it was worth it. And it was neat to see the kids, instead of saying, things like, vaccines are stupid. They actually had intellectual responses to each other and made intellectual comments and made some pretty sophisticated arguments. Some of the other topics we took a look at, we did defunding the police. We did, what else do we do? There was a Supreme Court case where somebody got passed over on their high school cheerleading team. They were a sophomore, and I think they were fully expecting to make the varsity squad, and got passed over from a freshman, and she was mad and posted all these obscenities on her social media accounts, and she got suspended from the school. And we debated whether or not she should have been suspended from school. What else did we do? We did first one we did, we went right in. First one we did is should Trump be held responsible for the January 6th attack on the Capitol? So
you started right away when it went Zoom Wednesdays. You went right to that one, huh?
Yeah, well, the next week we did.
Were,
I think
right?
it was we did. Yeah, it was like a couple of weeks later. So I'll tell you what, the only thing I do not debate in my government classes is abortion. We will not. I had that debate my first year. That was a stupid rookie mistake, because I had kids that were ready to, literally, I thought I was going to have to get the cop to come into one of my classrooms and break them up. I mean, there was one kid that stood on top of his chair and started yelling, "Well, if you believe in this, and that makes you a murderer just as much as somebody that kills their baby." And I was like, I didn't know that kid could talk. He didn't say anything all year. And here he is, ready to, cut the throat of somebody else, not literally, but figuratively. So what else did we do? We did, let me bring up my list. We did whether or not the Equal Rights Amendment can still be passed. It has enough states to even though the time limit ran out on it, they had enough states have ratified it to put it in the Constitution. Keystone Pipeline should continue. The George Floyd verdict, we took a look at that. Paying college athletes, that was one of the more popular ones. Raising the minimum wage, single-payer healthcare system, student debt forgiveness. So we did some pretty timely topics. And the point was for the students, I really, we do these, it's not the first year I've had debates in my classes, but the point is for them to understand that, government isn't just, a set of rules for how we organize our society. It's a living and breathing thing. Any other questions that you guys have? No. Okay, Google Jamboard is really easy to use, and it's not the only whiteboard application. There's plenty of them. But I will say this, if you do use Jamboard, the kids cannot, you don't have to make a separate account for them. They automatically have access to it. But when you set up your Jamboard, you have to make sure that you can, that the students can edit it. Otherwise, they won't be able to add anything to it. I found that out the hard way the first time. They're like, yeah, your Jamboard's there, but we can't add anything to it. So I had to hurry up and change the sharing. By default, I don't know why, but by default, it only allows you to place stuff on it, the owner of the document, owner of the Jamboard. Any other questions? Okay, I won't keep you guys any longer. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting in just a minute, but I just want to tell you too, if you have any questions or have suggestions for me, just, send me an email and I'll help you out, or you can help me out. All right. All right. Thanks for helping out, everybody. Thanks for participating, and we'll see you soon.
Good job, man. Thanks, buddy.
No problem.